So what the hell is going wrong at Sony? Over the last couple of months, the news coming from the Xbox camp has been, well, overwhelmingly positive, while Sony's been like a rabbit in the headlights. So much so that people are starting to point to the similarities with Xbox in 2013. And while it might not be quite as bad as that just yet, it is a little bit concerning. I think the rot began to take hold earlier than some people might think though, and perhaps can be traced back to the restructuring that occurred back in 2018. The resulting power struggle between Jim Ryan and Sean Layden ended with Layden being seemingly pushed out of the company, seeing a 30-odd-year career unceremoniously ended. It's a tad more complicated than that, of course, but the long and the short of it is that Jim Ryan ended up in charge, while developers were left wondering what the hell was going on, with some even suggesting that all the upheaval was having a negative impact on the transition from PS4 to PS5. This is the least amount of clarity we've ever had on a new console this close to transition. I believe that the global restructuring is exponentially exacerbating the already difficult process of transitioning to a new generation, and now we're getting nervous. And they were probably right to be nervous too. Not long after that, Jim Ryan took over and Sean Layden was out on his ear, as I've said. And just like the developer I mentioned earlier, that made me nervous because Jim Ryan's got form. I don't know if you remember his pronouncements on crossplay back in, I think it was 2017, but I certainly do. And in an interview with Eurogamer, this is what he said. We've got to be mindful of our responsibility to our install base. Minecraft, the demographic playing that, you know as well as I do, it's all ages, but it's also very young. We have a contract with the people who go online with us, that we look after them, and they are within the PlayStation curated universe. Yeah. Most of us saw this and thought it was complete bullshit, because the fact of the matter is that both Nintendo and Microsoft also have a contract with their user base to keep them safe. So it's no different for Sony. And having crossplay set up in a way that is safe for everybody is not beyond the pale, as many companies have since proven, including Sony. So as I say, the alarm bells went up because Jim Ryan had a history of talking nonsense already at that point. And then we had backwards compatibility. And we all know what he had to say about that, or we should do by now. And I'll quote again. When we've dabbled with backwards compatibility, I can say it is one of those features that is much requested but not actually used much, said Ryan. That, and I was at a Gran Turismo event recently where they had PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4 games. And the PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 games, they looked ancient. Like, why would anyone play this? Indeed, why, Jim? Why would anyone want to go back and play old games? Well, maybe they remember them from their childhood and they've got fond memories of playing them with their friends and want to revisit that. Or maybe they have an interest in the history of video games and maybe they want to write about those games and say they want to have a look at Gran Turismo from where it started to where it is now. There's any number of reasons why you might want to go back and play those old games. And the fact that you don't understand that shows that you don't really have any real interest in games in and of themselves. It shows that you are only interested in them from a business point of view. And that brings me to the next point. $70 games on the PlayStation 5. Most of us, apart from the odd rabid fanboy, looked at this and thought it was insane, especially when you compare it to Xbox and the fact that a lot of the games are coming to Xbox Game Pass and so end up being much better value for money. So while Microsoft are making their games better value for money, PlayStation are making their games worse value for money. And then you look at something like MLB The Show coming to Xbox Game Pass when it was always a PlayStation game. It comes to Game Pass and it's $70 on the PlayStation. You can spend $10 or $15 a month on Game Pass and get the game, or you can pay $70 on PlayStation and $84.99 for the Jackie Robinson edition, which allows play across both the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5. Something you get automatically on the Xbox if you get it on Game Pass. So, where's the value in that? But Jim Ryan thinks there's plenty of value in that. Here he is again. Yes, I do consider it fair. If you measure the hours of entertainment provided by a video game such as Demon's Souls, compare any other form of entertainment, I think that's a very straightforward comparison to draw. Well, you might think so, Jim, but when you compare it to the competition, as I've just said, it doesn't look so good value for money. And then, if you compare it to other media, such as novels, if you take something like the Lord of the Rings novels, how long do they take to read? And they're not going to cost you $84.99, are they? Nowhere near. Well, not unless you're buying a special slipcase edition with all the bells and whistles, and then maybe you could get a rare edition for more money. But just to get hold of the book and read the book, it's not going to cost you anything like $84.99, not even $70, is it? So then the games against other media and against the competition don't look such good value for money anymore, do they, Jim? Then we get into things like hardware issues with the PlayStation 5. If you look at the SSD expansion that we've been promised for the PlayStation 5, it's nowhere in sight, and it's looking like we're not going to see it until at least the summer. But Ryan doesn't think that's a problem. When asked about it, he said, "We're not hearing that. We'll obviously watch what happens as people unbox their PlayStations and start to use them. We think we'll be okay. We obviously are able to monitor hard drive usage on the PlayStation 4 microscopically, and everything that we saw there indicates that we should be fine." No, you're not. People are already running out of hard drive space, and they pretty much ran out of hard drive space straight away. Because when you get hold of a game like Call of Duty, though why anyone would is beyond me, you find that it takes up most of the hard drive space. And we knew this beforehand. People like me were talking about this way before the PlayStation 5 was released, and we were hoping that the SSDs, in fact, we were expecting that the SSDs would be available on launch. And here we are, still waiting. Well, Jim Ryan tells us that there's nothing wrong and there's nothing to worry about. Showing, for my money, that he's either completely out of touch or that he doesn't care. And there seems to be an inherent arrogance here. And I think this is permeating Sony now. And I'm not sure that was quite the case when we had Sean Layden at the helm. He seems to understand gamers a lot better, and he seemed to understand the industry he was in a lot better. Now, I might be giving him too much credit, but that's the perception that I have. Sean Layden seemed to get it. Jim Ryan doesn't. He's a marketing guy that doesn't seem to have any interest whatsoever in the actual gaming side of things. And that's crucial in an industry like this that involves creative talent. These guys need to be nurtured, and the customers, to some extent as well, need to be nurtured and encouraged and made to feel like they're part of it, made to feel like they actually have something worth investing in. And Sony are losing that. Yes, look, the hardcore fanboys are going to buy anything. You could stick a turd in a box and they'd buy it. Same with Xbox fanboys and, Nintendo fanboys and all the rest of it. But the rest of us, we're looking at this and he just seems completely out of touch. And as I say, not just out of touch. It's almost like he's dismissive of the fan base. And that is not a good look. But it goes beyond just perception. I mean, the fact that the hard drives are taking so long to get here could be a technical issue, I suppose, and it could be something that they need to work out before they can release them, but surely they should have looked at that before the console dropped. And the same with USB hard drives. I've had issues, and I know lots of other people have had issues with USB hard drives causing crashes on the PlayStation 5, and I've gone into that in more detail in other videos, so I'm not going to go over it here again, but the fact of the matter is that it is an issue. And then we get to the real crux. Studios. While Microsoft have been buying studios and opening studios, Sony have been doing quite the opposite. We've heard recently that Bend have lost loads of its key staff and that Days Gone 2 has been cancelled. As a recent article in Bloomberg from Jason Schreier put it, Oregon-based Sony Bend, best known for the 2019 open-world action game Days Gone, tried unsuccessfully to pitch a sequel that year, according to people familiar with the proposal. Although the first game had been profitable, its development had been lengthy, and critical reception was mixed, so a Days Gone 2 wasn't seen as a viable option. Bear in mind this was a new IP, and often new IPs take a while to establish their audience, so why on earth did Sony not give it another chance? This is reminiscent of Microsoft back in the early days of Xbox One, where they had games like Rise, Son of Rome and Sunset Overdrive that appeared and then disappeared and we never got sequels. Neither of those games were massive sellers, but they were good games. I think Rise was underrated and Sunset Overdrive was a fantastic game, and we all know what happened there. Insomniac, who already had a history with Sony admittedly, ended up being bought by Sony, which was a good fit, and making Spider-Man and Spider-Man Miles Morales and presumably Spider-Man 2 down the line. So Microsoft messed up and Sony picked up the pieces and ended up with a bloody good studio making bloody good games. If you look at what's happening now though, most of the movement is in the opposite direction, with developers coming from Sony to Microsoft. And the stories are happening, well, not thick and fast, but they are quite regular. Sony, it seems, have become so obsessed with their first-party blockbusters that they're prepared to drop something like Days Gone and spend time and energy on a Last of Us remaster for PlayStation 5, when, if you look at people online, nobody really wants it, even people like me who love the game to death. Why do we need a remaster of The Last of Us? And they even mishandled that, taking the studio or the visual arts service group that was supposed to be making it and folding them into Naughty Dog. As Jason Schreier's article put it, Michael Mumbauer, who took over direction of the visual arts service group in 2007, recruited a group of about 30 developers internally and from neighbouring game studios to form a new development unit within Sony. The idea was to expand upon some of the company's most successful franchises, and the team began working on a remake of the 2013 hit The Last of Us for the PlayStation 5. But Sony never fully acknowledged the team's existence or gave them the funding and support needed to succeed in the highly competitive video game market, according to the people involved. The studio never even got its own name. Instead, Sony moved ownership of The Last of Us remake to its original creator, Naughty Dog, a Sony-owned studio behind many of the company's best-selling games. So, I mean, okay, they put it back with Naughty Dog, which was fine, but from what I understand it, the way they treated everybody at the Visual Arts Service Group was appalling, and they've subsequently lost many of those people, including Michael Mumbauer. The weird thing there is that this Visual Arts Service Group would seem to be the perfect group to make kind of remakes or to put out remasters of games for a service like PlayStation Now so that it could compete with Xbox. We've seen the successes of things like the Master Chief Collection, and Sony have plenty of franchises that could take similar treatment and be put out on PlayStation Now, which would make PlayStation Now extremely attractive to a lot of people. It seems crazy that they're shutting down the very groups that could help keep them ticking over when they're not putting out their first-party blockbusters. And let's be honest, these first-party blockbusters cost so much money and take so long to develop that you do need other things to fill the gaps. Microsoft have learnt that already, and they're doing a great job keeping these franchises relevant with things like FPS boost and all the rest of it. Sony seem to be happy to just sit on their hands and just wait for their next big blockbuster, and I think that's a huge mistake. As is closing their smaller studios like Japan Studio that made Gravity Rush and Everybody's Golf. According to Games Industry Biz, Sony is reportedly winding down one of its longest-standing studios, with the vast majority of development staff at the Japan studio being let go. These games are extremely popular in Japan, so a move like this looks, well, crazy to an outsider like myself. I just don't understand it. But it's part of a pattern. You know, we're seeing Sony, as I say, sit on their hands. They don't seem to know what to do with PlayStation Now either. It's certainly not being fully utilised, and it looks like a poor relation next to Xbox's Game Pass, which releases games day and date. Now, I know some people have said Sony couldn't afford to do that, and they'd be leaving money on the table because people will go out and pay $60, $70 for these games. But over time, that's not going to be the case because people will look at the value option between PlayStation and Xbox, and they'll be saying, well, why am I spending $70 on these games when I can get them on Xbox and just have Game Pass? I know I keep saying that, but Microsoft is changing the landscape and Sony are just sitting there watching. Then we have other things like the way PlayStation 4/5 handles game saves, and I've already talked about this in previous videos, but it's a mess. How on earth did they think that having purchase games having one set of saves and PlayStation Now games having a separate save, even if it's the same game? Again, it makes no sense and it's a complete mess and it needs sorting out. Then there's just the PR stuff like Outriders coming day one to Xbox, and then the stories that the next Kojima game may also be coming to Xbox and probably Game Pass. Then we hear that Microsoft might be buying Sega and some other Japanese studio, and a lot of the industry insiders are suggesting that they will be buying some studio or studios in Japan imminently. That may not be true, but you look at Sony closing down Japan studio, or as good as closing down Japan studio, while Microsoft are looking to purchase in Japan. Now, that doesn't mean that Microsoft are going to make headway in Japan, and they probably won't, but they're going in the right direction, or at least they seem to be going in the right direction. Sony don't seem to be going in any direction currently. As I say, it's all over the place. Story after story coming from Microsoft is positive. Story after story coming from Sony currently is negative. Or just there's nothing. Sometimes there's just nothing coming from them. And it does make you wonder what the hell is going on with all the other stuff we've already heard about. The next question, obviously, though, is what does this mean for Sony moving forward? And does it actually mean they're going to lose market share? Well, not necessarily in the short term. On Destin Legary's recent video, New Players Love Xbox, Paul Tassi made an interesting point in response to Destin asking why Sony has been so quiet. And he said this, I guess because they can be. Ultimately, they believe the games when they get here will speak for themselves. And I do think that's a good point. I do think the way Sony are at the moment, they've got such a big fan base and they've got such a good selection of IP that they can draw on that could keep them going. But things are changing. Sony do have a very good track record of producing great games, but that won't be the case if the company alienates all its developers, which it seems to be doing, and continues to close studios. We've already heard the stories about crunch and turnover of staff at Naughty Dog, and with the stories I mentioned earlier about Japan Studio being shut down, Michael Mumbauer's group being subsumed into Naughty Dog, and everything else going on, well, there's a chance that we'll see fewer games and fewer great games, which is more important, coming from Sony. It's not a given, of course, and it's true that Sony have plenty of potential great games in the works, but, as Sully put it in a recent episode of Chip Chat, what happens if PlayStation have a couple of duds? And that could also happen very easily. Jim Ryan and others in senior positions at Sony want cornflakes, as in they want a guaranteed product that will always sell. But that's not how it works in the creative industries. There's no real guarantee that a game is going to come out and it's going to be successful, even if the studio who makes it has a great track record. And that's why you always need to be encouraging and nurturing new talent. And Sony just don't seem to be doing that at the moment. And maybe they're doing stuff behind the scenes, I don't know. But the perception is that they're shutting things down, they're alienating developers, and they're messing up on all fronts. Or maybe not all fronts, but many fronts, while Microsoft keep making all the right moves. And look, I want Sony to keep producing great games, but the parallels with Microsoft last generation simply are too stark to ignore. Back then, it was Xbox games that were being cancelled, like Scalebound, and there were stories of developer unrest all over the place. And how did it go for Microsoft? Well, it's pretty obvious to anyone watching that it didn't go well, and it's taken years for Microsoft to turn it round. And they haven't even completely turned it round yet. They are still behind Sony as it stands. But they are moving forward. And they're the ones who are setting the agenda. Sony simply aren't doing that at the moment. And look, I hope that they've got something big planned, that they're keeping their powder dry for some big announcements. But I remember thinking that about Microsoft back in 2013, 2014, and thinking, oh, they can't surely be just going with this. Surely things are going to get better. And then the next year, surely things are going to get, and then the next year, sure, and so on and so forth. And it just didn't. And as I say, let's hope that doesn't happen with PlayStation. Let's hope PlayStation do have things in the works. For now, though, well, Jim Ryan is looking increasingly like a liability, certainly in my mind. He's a marketing man who doesn't seem to understand the gaming industry, and he's driven by spreadsheets rather than game demos. It's as simple as that. Something, I don't know what, but something has to change. And it has to change quickly because the perception is changing. And when you've got people like Paul Tassi and others saying that they're making the Xbox their go-to console and they're only using the PlayStation for exclusives, then you can't ignore it anymore. As I say, I really hope that Sony have something planned, and I'll be surprised if they haven't. But we need to hear something soon. And we need to get some games out there from Sony. As I say, I think they'll still be okay this generation, but they're definitely not going to have it all their own way. And they need to do something to change this shift in perception that's going on. They need to make people feel that they are interested in the gamers. I mean, you know, the mantra, for the gamers. That was a winning saying last generation. They need to get back to that idea. That's my view anyway. And if you agree with me, let me know in the comments. And if you disagree with me, let me know in the comments. But in the meantime, don't forget to give me a thumbs up. And, go and check one or more of my other videos as well. And comment in those as well. And give me a thumbs up and all the rest of it. And if you really want to get into it with me, come over to my Discord, because I'm always prepared to have a chat in there. And you can usually have a longer chat and you can find what people are saying as well. But for now, I'm done. I'm going to go and grab myself a cup of tea. And I'll speak to you in the next one. Cheers.